interesting little old file. Hardly any encryption at all.
I remember this.
I'll have to investigate later. Unusual symbology.
That's not right. That's not allowed.
possibly be that simple. Good enough.
Three great themes left to the reign of Claudius. One of them is Britain. Is Britain.
Question of Britain.
In 43 AD, he invades Britain fully.
Yeah, because the only person who had done this before was Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
And he had gone over twice, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Kicked a few British tribes around, declared victory, and left.
It was like about 100 years earlier.
Yeah. There's no point.
So apparently we are told that, we are told that apparently it was a great moment in time, 43 AD, that on the German frontiers it was all quiet.
Right.
It was all quiet on the German front.
God, imagine that.
And there was loads of internal strife, civil, tribal warfare within Britain.
Right.
So it's just a perfect moment for the Romans to strike.
Yeah, and it's a bit better than Caligula, just collecting seashells.
Yeah, that's just an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Everyone knew it, really. And Claudius, it helps shore up his reign. Because 43 AD isn't that long after he comes to power.
Yeah, because he hasn't got a military triumph at this point, does he?
Yeah, he's not a military man at all.
No. But nothing's been done in his name either.
Right, okay.
I mean, Augustus wasn't a military man either. But lots was done in his name.
Right, yeah. As the son of Drusus, the great general Drusus, and the brother of the great Germanicus, the nephew of the great Tiberius, he sort of needs to do something.
Yeah.
So, okay, Tom Holland says this. This is great, actually. You'll love this. It's a description about Britain, or what the Romans thought about Britain in the first half of the 1st century AD. Tom Holland wrote, quote, "Few knew much about Britain, but what they did know was deeply off-putting. The natives were, if anything, even more barbarous than the Germans. They painted themselves blue. They held wives in common. They wore hair on the upper lip, an affectation so grotesque that Latin did not even have a word for it. Nor were their women any better. They were reported to dye their bodies black, and even on occasion to go naked. Savages capable of such unspeakable customs were clearly capable of anything. And sure enough, just as it was part of the terror of the Germans that they practiced murderous rites in the depths of their dripping forests, so did the Britons have priests who, in groves festooned with mistletoe, were reported to commit human sacrifice and cannibalism. These druids, as the priests were called, had once infested Gaul as well, until their suppression upon the orders of Tiberius. But across the ocean, beyond the stern reach of Roman law, they still thrived. This is sort of apparently a well-known line just from a Roman writer at the time, said, magic to this very day, i.e. 43 AD, magic to this very day held Britain in its shadow.
No doubt.
So they saw it as utterly foreign. If you go across the ocean, I mean, it's sort of another world if you cross the Rhine, but if you go across the ocean, it's otherworldly.
Yeah. And it's totally different as well. Like, it's a different environment to Italy, Spain, North Africa, where, you know, you can complain about a lot of things, but you can't complain about the weather.
Yeah. But in Britain you can.
Yeah, you really can.
It's
And-
freezing and gloomy and rainy all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's cold and wet and depressing.
It's categorically not the Mediterranean word. Yeah,
The amount of sun that Britain gets a year is actually really small compared to any Mediterranean country. Like you look at the maps of just the amount of sun per day and over the year, it's shocking actually. How like it's definitely informed the English temperament, no doubt.
We are North Atlantic people.
Yes,
We are Atlantic men.
yes. We're not Mediterranean.
Right.
There's a deep difference because of the environment.
Mm.
So it must have been generally quite depressing for the Romans to have arrived in Britain. Been like,
Yeah.
actually, why? And then, as Caractacus put it, it's like, we've just got mud huts. Why do you covet these? You know, it's like, sorry, what are you doing here? You know?
Yeah, yeah. And we talk about superstition. A lot of the when it was clear that the 4 legions stationed up there were going to be sent across, bounced across the ocean to invade Britain, a lot of them were terrified, petrified. Crossing the ocean is like a sacrilege.
Yeah.
And on the other side are like even more barbarous savages than the Germans. Like we're terrified of it.
Yeah.
And apparently there was almost an insurrection until a couple of stories where their spirits were buoyed, and then eventually they had sort of we're told a festival spirit. The invasion was like a type of festival.
Oh, good, because there was literally no way they could lose.
To cut to the chase, it all went very well.
Of course it did.
The seas were calm on the crossing. They established 3 bridgeheads pretty much unopposed. They had 2 battles, fairly small battles, which they absolutely pwned.
Yeah.
One of the big chieftains in the southeast of England was killed in that as well. It was quite easy, relatively easy.
Yeah, it's simple. Because the Romans at this point are just the war machine. Like they've got such an ancient tradition of killing people. Well, there's just no way the Britons could possibly have competed. Like, you don't have the technology. They didn't have armor. They probably didn't have chainmail. You know.
Yeah.
If they were lucky, they had iron swords.
The Celts often made it a point of going into battle bare-breasted, if not naked,
Yeah.
heroically naked.
But they're the ones on the continent who at least have access to the technology. I mean, they're going to be considered to be backwards by Celtic standards, but moreover, the problem with Britain as well is it's a tiny patchwork of tiny kingdoms, like tiny chiefdoms. So if the chief can summon 500 men, oh well, that's a strong chief, and so he's going to have a coalition of dozens and dozens of these guys to get like 10,000 men together. But the Romans have come across with what, 20, 30,000?
They had 4 legions, and legions at this time are between 5,000 and 8,000 apiece, I think.
Right. So yeah, so
At that time, no. The average legion is 1,000 men, and then there's smaller subsidiaries within that one legion. But on average, one legion is 1,000 men.
somewhere upper limit 30,000 Roman legions, the legionaries, have arrived in Britain. The Britons were there literally the spears and shields and nothing else. Woad. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
This is just such a...
It's like overkill.
Yeah, it's unnecessarily powerful. You could have put 10,000 Romans and done it, But no, we've got 30,000 Romans just lay waste to the swamps and bogs of Britain for some reason.
Yeah, and they do. They build a bridgehead across the Thames, or a bridge across the Thames. Where there's a tiny settlement, but they make it out for the first time.
Which is shocking to the Britons, no
Londinium.
doubt, because they're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
It crosses the water. They probably didn't have any bridges.
Well, yeah, certainly they would be overawed by the engineering feats the Romans brought with them, among many other things.
And the technical, the level of armor that the Romans must have had must have been miraculous. Like, the Roman sword was probably way better in quality than the Britons. It's like people from another planet landing in Britain.
The gladius, not only just in and of itself is great, but they're trained to use it in its best way. But
Yeah.
for hundreds of years they've been fighting in Spain. That's a great sword. Are we using that? We're going to use that in this specific way, which is almost undefeatable at the moment. Yeah. They're outclassed. The Britons are outclassed in every way.
Yeah, there's just nothing they can do.
To be fair.
The Romans basically auto-combat the entire...
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
just, like, if you're a Roman, you're
Yeah.
kidding, it's like, okay, no, auto-combat.
It's- yeah.
And that's what Claudius basically does, right?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't go with them, does he?
No, they wait until they've won and then they call him and he goes
There
there.
you go.
That's what happens.
Claudius literally auto-combats and then goes over.
So the Romans pushed them back to the biggest main, you couldn't even call it city, the biggest
Yeah.
settlement in the southeast of England was Camalodunum,
Well, it
which
wasn't
is
England.
Colchester. Sorry, the southeast of what we call England.
Yeah.
Well, they called it. When they make it a province, they called it Britannia. So what we call England, the biggest settlement in the southeast was Camalodunum, which is Colchester. There's a big Roman fort castle thing to this day that was built in the age of Claudius. Go and visit this day. To this day. Just about 30 different chiefs were brought and bent the knee, even ones all the way from the Orkneys. We're told.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Even bent the knee.
Can you imagine how... Just what could the chief of the Orkneys look like in 43 AD? What could it look like?
Yeah, well.
100 people?
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Like, it's 100 people in, like, little huts, freezing off the north of Scotland. Hopefully growing some oats, or maybe, you know, raising some woolly sheep. Like, what? And then the Romans come along. It's just the majesty of the vast imperium of the entire Mediterranean basin has arrived, and the chief of the Orkneys is like, what the hell is this? Why are you here?
Yeah, what?
Where do you come from? Like, I don't know where you've come from. I don't know where Italy is. Like, I don't know what an Italian is. I don't know what a Roman is. I don't know what, you know, wine is. Like, what are you doing here? Like, I shear sheep in the very North Atlantic.
Yeah,
it
it
must
would be
preposterous.
an army from their point of view, from another world.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
invincible soldiers
Yeah.
who've turned up for no reason.
They build roads wherever they go.
Yeah.
They build a camp out of nowhere
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wait,
Stone
what
buildings
is
suddenly
this?
array. I've never seen worked stone. Like, what are you talking about? You know, what are you doing? Who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah, we've got Stonehenge, but that was from thousands of years before, and we don't know who built that either.
yeah, we didn't know that.
We don't know who they were, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, once they besiege and take Colchester, they then send word to Claudius.
Just to be clear, Colchester, if they were lucky, would have had a wooden palisade
Right,
defending
that's
it.
it, right,
And it
so
would have been
that's
just
sort
on
of
the
it.
top of a hill with a wooden palisade. The
So,
Romans
yeah.
have been taking walled cities for centuries.
Yeah.
Centuries.
They take rock fortresses that are
Yeah.
impenetrable
Masada.
out in the east.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
It is just...
We'll move millions of tons of
Yeah.
rock to build a ramp up to that. You're not getting away from us. Nothing will.
And it's just... And then you've got this little wooden palisade fort. at the
Outside
top of the hill.
Colchester.
Yeah. So what do
It's
you...
laughable.
Yeah, they must have been like, wow, this is brilliant. We're being paid for this.
Yeah.
We're literally being paid to just life on easy mode for the Roman Empire.
It's the definition of a cakewalk, really.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's crazy.
If I read the
yeah,
paragraph
please.
from Suetonius where he talks about it, because again, sort of a famous paragraph, all historians that are interested in the invasion of Britain will pick out this paragraph. In fact, I think I read it before when I did an earlier epoch with Josh about Roman Britain, but I'll read it.
There's a meme going around where it's just loads of different Roman authors talking in the 1st century AD, talking about Britain, and they're just like the most ignorant, ugly, ridiculous people in the world. It's like, yeah, but they've been left alone for a long time. Sorry.
Suetonius says, Claudius's sole campaign in his whole reign was of no great importance. See, Suetonius says it's no big,
There's nothing there.
he marched over there, smashed them up, no biggie, easy. The Senate had already voted him triumphal decorations, but he thought it beneath his dignity to accept these and decided that Britain was the country where a real triumph could be most readily earned. Its conquest had not been attempted since the days of the divine Julius, and the Britons were now threatening vengeance because the Romans had refused to return some fugitives.
Oh yeah. Let's hear. Okay, what's going to be the vengeance then? Like, I really want to know. You know, is there an emperor of Britain? I mean, that'd be a start. You know, can you muster more than 5,000 men? Show me. Bollocks.
Well, one thing to say is that one of the leaders, the main leader, ends up becoming sort of the leader of the rebellion or the reaction to Roman invasion is Caractacus.
Yeah, Caractacus.
I'll get to him at the end, what happens to him and everything. So, sailing from Ostia, Claudius was nearly wrecked off the Ligurian coast, and again near the Chauchades Islands, but made port safely at Massalia, which is Marseille. Thence he marched north through Gaul until reaching Gazoriacum, which is Boulogne, crossed over to Britain without incident, and was back in Rome 6 months later. He had fought no battles and suffered no casualties, but reduced a large part of the island to submission. His triumph was a very splendid one, and among those whom he allowed to travel to Rome to witness it were his provincial governors and several exiles as well. The emblems of his victory included the naval crown, representing the crossing and conquest, so to speak, of the ocean, which he set on the gable of his Palatine home next to the civic crown.
I'm just picturing it from like the perspective of a British pig farm or something. Just there, tending your pigs. And then a Roman legion marches along, just for hours.
Yeah.
Just what the hell is
What
this?
is this?
Yeah, you're just like, just shoveling pigs. What are you doing? You're under Rome's control now. So what do I have to do? Nothing, just carry on. Okay? Alright.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going back to Rome to declare my victory.
Does the exploring.
Yeah.
You know, where's your chief? He's over there with his pigs. You know, you submit to Rome or die. I guess I'll submit to Rome.
Yeah.
What do you want me to? What is this?
And you're going to bring sort of civilization and things,
Yeah.
and more trade and stuff. Yeah.
Can't have been terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've got no choice.
This is literally like it's a childlike civilization kind of in a way.
Yeah, men versus boys in a sense.
Yeah, it's not their fault. You know, it's kind of geographically determined that you've been on the edge of the world for such a long time and nobody really comes to you. Like there's trade with the Celts and stuff, but like it's not. There isn't the sort of pressure on Britain that there is in the Mediterranean world. You know, like you can't just be invaded like that by anyone. They can't walk there. Therefore, you're very safe. That's a strong rule of thumb in the ancient world. If they can't walk there, then you're basically safe. It's okay, great. No wonder you became kind of just settled, I guess we'll say.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the push to develop if you're not under threat?
That's why they say places like the Andaman Islands, why do they still live in the Stone Age, effectively? They've got no need to innovate.
Yeah.
There's no need, there's no pressure on them to advance. Anyway, Claudius spends something like, they think, about 16 days in Britain. It's just interesting to think that even Claudius, the divine Claudius, because after his death Vespasian makes him a god, was in Colchester. He was actually in Colchester. It's funny.
As well, he must
Bit
have
love
gone there, like,
Colchester.
look, there's nothing here.
Yeah, right.
Like, this is the reason that most British people actually don't want to go to Mars. They waste of time, there's nothing there. Literally, Claudius goes to Mars and he's like, okay, mud huts. I've seen mud huts. Let's get back.
Yeah, yeah. Why spend time on the frontier?
Yeah.
You don't need to.
I'd like a hot bath.
But he does make the most of it for sort of propaganda reasons and all sorts of things. So, and he was quite proud. He was very proud of it because, in a way, or on paper, he's made a whole new province.
Yeah, yeah.
He's bested Drusus and Germanicus in that sense.
And he's defeated evil magical druids. He's explored the limits of the known world. And it turned out there was basically nothing.
His famous father and brother, Drusus and Germanicus, never created a whole new province. They were never emperor. He's bested them in some ways. He's on coins. His name went further in the ancient world than either of theirs did. Right? I mean, so it's like a dream come true for him. You know, get to the age of 50 and you're just the butt of jokes. And now he's a military... He's got a triumph.
Yeah,
he gets
and
a triumph.
I've
for it.
created a province. I've expanded the empire.
Yeah. In Corinth, in Greece, a cult to that victory was established. There you go. Tom Holland's writes this. To invade Britain with its chariots, its mud huts, and its phantom-haunted groves.
Still chariots. I forgot about that.
To invade Britain with its chariots, its mud huts, and its phantom-haunted groves had been for a man like Claudius, a historian really. It was to travel back in time to the very beginnings of his city, to that fabulous age when citizens had assembled on the campus Martius, before marching off to war against cities barely a few miles away. So it was sort of a dream come true for Claudius. He could sort of play the the part of being like a Scipio.
And it is kind of like playing, though, isn't it? Like, there's so little risk to Rome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's so little really gained. Like, I dread to think how much money the Romans had to spend essentially developing Britain. Like, okay, now we've conquered this. Just, what now? Say, well, there's no infrastructure there. They don't have any roads. They don't have bathhouses. They don't have buildings. We're going to build it all. All of it.
Yeah.
From the ground up.
Yeah. And they do. That's sort of
Yeah,
what they do.
cracking
Like,
400 years.
yeah, like Greco-Roman culture is sort of unstoppable
No, yeah.
as well, though. Like, it's just gonna
Well, it's
because it
not-
takes a few generations. There's the Iceni revolt in the Age of Nero
Yeah.
and everything, but eventually they go all the way up to Scotland. They never invade Ireland, but they go all the way up to Scotland, sort of in the Age of Agricola, which Tacitus tells us all about and things. And yeah, for a few
Demolish the
centuries.
Caledonians.
For a few centuries, there's sort of Gallo-Roman culture dominates Britain.
But there's nothing really to oppose it. That's the thing.
And even after the Romans leave,
Yeah,
it
they
still
want-
continues for generations.
Yeah. No. It's because look at what it replaced. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Not a fantastic amount.
And the thing is, it's not that I don't even
mean,
find. It's not that the Druids and stuff aren't interesting either, but it's such a weak form of civilization. There's no permanence to it.
yeah. They didn't have marketplaces, the Celts particularly. They didn't have things like that. They had gods, but quite often they were localized ones.
Yeah.
All sorts of the whole epochs about the difference between Celtic and Roman
We should.
culture. We're currently doing the Celtic thing with Josh on
Oh, yeah.
Contemplations.
Right,
yeah.
right,
Okay, so to finish up on the theme of Britain, Caractacus, though, was still at large. He was never
Yep.
captured or killed in 43. And he's finally captured in like 51. So he's at large for like, 8 odd years.
Trying to
And-
foment rebellion.
yeah, all sorts of rebellions, and his story is long and interesting and complicated. But to cut to the chase on this, because we've got to move on, in 51, he's brought in chains, and his whole family are brought to Rome.
Yeah.
Sort of paraded through Rome, and
Can
brought
you
before
even
the Senate.
Imagine what his impression of Rome. I mean, we know exactly what his impression of Rome was. There's a famous quote from it. So why do you? How's it go exactly? Why do you live in these buildings cover our mud huts?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Why would you want to invade Britain? You're so much more advanced than us.
Yeah.
What could you possibly want
Yeah.
with Britain?
Yeah, that's exactly the right. Like, you can totally understand why he would have that impression. What's wrong with you?
Because usually when foreign chieftains or rulers are brought before Rome in chains, well, you'd be ritualistically strangled.
Yeah,
Quite often, like on the Capitol
yeah,
or something.
in public.
You'd be perhaps tortured, but certainly executed for the gratification of the Roman citizens. But they don't do that, practice, because there was a story of when Scipio once had, I think I might be wrong, but I think it was one of the North African rulers had been brought to Rome, and in sort of an imperial magnanimity, he sets him free. Claudius knew that and loved that.
Right.
And what happens is Caractacus goes before, I believe it's the actual Senate, and does a rousing speech. Caractacus does, and he says, "Okay, you've won, but I don't submit. No, I won't bend the knee. I'm here in chains because you forced me here. I do not submit." All this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Saying if you want to keep Britain, you better, as Romans, you all better sleep with your swords, because we'll never give in. We will never submit. We'll never be dominated. And right.
They completely allowed it. But anyway, yeah.
It was
the
so-
spirit of the thing was good.
yeah, the spirit. It was so brazen and bold that he gets like a round of applause. And Claudius says, "Do you know what? I'll set you free.
Yeah.
You and your whole family are just free. Go
Yeah.
walk about Rome,
Yeah, 'cause he
and
lived in
have a
Rome.
pension.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a pension.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Like,
Yeah.
You just have to be audacious enough. But the thing is,
Yeah.
what it implies is that the obvious, it's kind of like a teenager being this kind of brazen to you. You might actually, oh yeah, well, you're a kid, mouthing off, and you think, okay, well, that was actually quite, funny or something,
Yeah.
because the relative power dynamic is just so lopsided. It's comical that they would say, well, we'll never give in. It's like, it doesn't matter if you give in up. It literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, we're literally going to build a civilization on top of you, and you can't do anything about it. You know, and
It's like in a film where the boss or something, you're really rude to them and they say, I like your moxie, kid.
yeah.
You know, I'm going to promote you, actually, or something.
Exactly. You know, it's like strangling him. Like the reason that you strangle Vercingetorix is because he was a genuine threat.
Right, yeah.
He was a
Right.
genuinely scary person. He could have defeated Caesar. You know, maybe he could have led a Gallic invasion of 50,000 Gauls into. You know, and it's not like hundreds of thousands of Gauls hadn't invaded Italy. This is all scary. But Crassus could never have done anything like this. Like there's no glory in having him strangled to death for the divine satisfaction of the Roman gods. There's nothing in there. You know, it would have been embarrassing. Why are you strangling this guy?
And doesn't it show like a magnanimity, like you're so above, you're so above it
Yeah.
that you can just go and I don't need to kill you. And I don't personally hate you or anything.
In fact, it would be kind of embarrassing if I did kill him.
Right, yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah,
So it would make you be like, why? You know?
yeah, like beating up a little kid.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was literally Crassus's, why did you?
Right, oh, yeah.
It's a good question. So what are you doing here?
And we're told in Tacitus, for example, he says him and his family are just walking around Rome dumbstruck,
Yeah, of course they are.
awestruck. They sort of can't believe what they're looking at.
Look at these giant marble buildings.
Mm.
Look at the aqueduct. Look at everything. Like, what? Like, I come from a little palisaded mud hut village.
Like the Pantheon, which was built by Agrippa. Just,
Can you even imagine? I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's amazing now.
yeah, right, I was just going to say exactly that.
I saw the Pantheon a couple of years ago. It's an incredible building.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
love it.
Can you even imagine what Crassus made?
Yeah, it's actually beggars belief. It would have, wouldn't it?
But if I didn't know they were the work of gods, if I didn't know it wasn't the work of gods, that's what I would assume.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Why have they sent 20,000 guys to storm Colchester? Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
It's funny you brought up abortion there as well, not to go all over the map, but one of the really interesting points I found, I think it was chapter 8, we discussed Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones as a sort of test case for how the moral permissibility of abandoning a baby has come down to consent-based morality because of the sexual revolution. So it's not even now that men are trying to say, no, this is my child, but you shouldn't kill it. It's now saying that, well, if you can kill it, I can walk away from it, and we can both renounce our obligations and both be atomized individuals, as some of the feminists like Firestone would have wanted, a complete disconnection of the sexes. So I didn't notice in the book where you personally lined up on the issue. If you're not comfortable talking about it, that's fine. But do you think we need to, especially in the UK, because we don't have that conversation at all, in the US they are, have the conversation about abortion access and the morality of it in order to curb the worst excesses of the sexual revolution when it's sometimes used as a contraception?
Yeah, well spotted. I kind of deliberately didn't write about abortion. It's such a painful topic, except to point out that clearly it's incredibly important in the history of sexual revolution. I mean, I think the reason that the timeline is as it is in this country and also elsewhere, where you have the pill made available first to married women and then to unmarried women, and then you have abortion decriminalisation and legalisation coming in afterwards, is I think because the pill wasn't actually an especially effective contraception in its early incarnation. It's still, like the oral pill still has quite a high failure rate and therefore results in unwanted pregnancies quite often. But because you had the introduction of it leading to the collapse of social norms around heterosexual relationships, you had an absolute rise in the amount of premarital sex that was happening, and that was resulting in an increase in number of unwanted pregnancies, and therefore you had abortion brought in basically as a kind of backup option. Particularly, I think, because you had, the daughters of politicians and other. You had middle class women changing their sexual behaviour in a way that was really radically different from the past, and therefore it seemed more in the interests of decision makers to permit abortion. And it is clearly the case that the existence of legalised abortion does radically change how much both men and women feel they need to invest in sexual relationships and how careful they need to be. You've probably seen various articles after the Dobbs decision about, I've stopped having casual sex because of Dobbs, this sort of thing. Which they're sort of funny because they're like, yes, that's exactly what Conservatives wanted to do.
I covered that with some glee, thank you for recreating the Lysistrata, but I wasn't going to go there anyway.
Yeah. I think it's because many liberals don't really understand the Conservative objection to abortion. I think the assumption is that it's just rooted in misogyny. I mean, maybe in a handful of cases it is. I do try to explain this sometimes to liberal friends, like Conservatives who oppose abortion. They really do believe that this is comparable as an ethical catastrophe to, say, the transatlantic slave trade. They really do believe that. I am on the fence on the morality of abortion, basically. I probably actually am roughly in the position that the modal voter is, including the modal female voter. Women are more anti-abortion than men are. Mothers are the most anti-abortion group that there is. And the modal view is basically that abortion is a bad, sad thing that sometimes needs to happen, and that it's the earlier the better, and that there are.
It does not need to happen. If you aren't ready, you haven't taken the support to have it, don't have sex, you don't have unprotected sex. Simple as that. Don't end a child's life because you're being stupid.
There is such a thing as a good and a bad abortion. There are bad reasons to have one, and there are better reasons to have one. That's basically where I lie. I also do recognise, though, and this is something that I wrestle with, and I've actually just written a really long essay on this for First Things, which will hopefully be out in a month or two, that the reason that abortion is as big a deal as it is, as a political issue, particularly in America, and less so here, but of course it was a bigger issue here, it's just that we have... the pro-choice argument has won here more than it has done so yet. In America, we don't know what direction we're heading in, but it's because abortion represents the bleeding edge of de-Christianization. And really, the late 60s and early 70s is a very important dividing line in terms of the end of institutionalized Christianity at the state level. Because Christians have a very unusually vehement opposition to abortion among faith traditions, both pre and after Christ. And Christians also have a very vehement opposition to infanticide, which of course in the Roman world was completely normal, and actually has been normal in most societies. This isn't nice to talk about, but my first degree was in anthropology. Infanticide is extremely common, and abortion is extremely common. And most societies view them pretty much on a continuum and see them as morally permissible in certain circumstances, normally for roughly the same reasons as we now see abortion as permissible. The difference is that we have the technology that enables us to basically kill the unborn baby earlier than, say, ancient Romans who don't have ultrasound. Christianity stands out among all of these societies as having a very, very unique attitude towards abortion and infanticide. And that's an attitude that obviously by many pro-choice secularists is going to be dismissed as archaic, illogical. It seems sort of almost arbitrary. The Christian
Just remember this. As soon as a child is conceived, it's a living life. Growing life. Just remember, every abortion is killing a human.
Really?
It is wrong. And you have no excuses to say it is right. If you're one of those people that pull the excuses of, you want sex, fine. Wear your condoms. Use the contraceptives. And be willing to accept the fact that when you make love and when you have sex, a child can and will produce. Don't be stupid.
All right. Let's see what we've got. Hi, bring a sword. Hey, you're gonna love this. Think you can eat a hive knight? These are the questions you ask yourself. Transmat ready. Lock and load, hotshot. Get those moats to the bank. incoming at command. Hostiles at the ring.